Well, shalom everybody, welcome back. Thank you so much for joining me. We're up to page 104 of volume 2 of Rabbi Victor Miller's new translation and commentary of Duties of the Mind. And we are in the second gate, Shah HaBekina, the gate of examining. And today's topic is how to reflect on creation. And I think this is a very important topic. And I was just reading through Psalm 14 verses 2 and 3. And it struck my attention that there is a malady that has affected mankind throughout his existence, and that is his disconnection from Hashem to a greater or lesser extent, which affects everyone, which pretty much happened since the fall. And I found these passages quite evocative and very related to the topic. And it says, Adonai looks down from heaven to see if there is anyone who understands and seeks him. So not just anybody who seeks him, but people who understand. But they have turned aside and together they have become corrupt. There is no one who does good, not even one. And so this is a similar condition to the population of Earth before the deluge. Everybody kind of was out for his own agenda. It was every man for himself. And in this current age, we are really reaching the same type of situation, which has been brought about by the myriad of distractions that we have that kind of get our attention and lead us away. And so it's very hard to come up from all this stuff and actually drag yourself away to go and study and to learn. Particularly when you can spend hours scrolling through 30-second videos, or watch videos on topics that pretty much could be about anything except that which is applicable for you to be learning. And this is one of the ways that the dark forces also distract religious people, is that they will try and draw them away from subjects that they need to learn and have them learn subjects that really don't do anything in terms of improving their behavior, improving the type of people that they are. When the Sitra Akra, the dark forces, can see that they can't get you to stop reading and learning things pertaining to Hashem, it will revert to a plan B and try and get you to be reading stuff that isn't really going to help you. So over time, you'll fill your head of all this information, but at the end of the day, not much has really changed in terms of who you are before you came to the knowledge of all this stuff. And so this is what these videos are principally designed to do, is to get you to break out of that pattern. And so it's really sort of putting a mirror up and sort of going, okay, let's have a look at this. Let's see where I need work. And as I've mentioned, we're looking at the concept of having a reflective attitude. And so you can't be reflective unless you choose to become aware, and then not only that, choose to examine the things that you become aware of. Rather than just kind of having a quick look at them and moving on to the next thing, which is, how we're being trained, how our brains are being trained now in social media with these sort of, 30-second videos and things like that. So we've got to start to combat this, and this is hopefully what these videos will help you do. Okay, so we now start the third perek, the third chapter, and we've explained what Bekina is and why we are duty bound to perform it. But now we need to ask, how does one reflect on creation? To answer this question, we can say that reflecting on creation can be done by studying the basic elements of which the world is composed, and by studying what happens when they are combined. We should also study the qualities of the components that make up every combination, like the trunk, the roots, the branches, and the tree, and the functions of the combined entity. What use does the tree serve, for example? And so the more we look into this, the more we see that not only is the world full of order, but the order that the world functions in is highly complex. And at first glance, things can look completely foreign to one another. But when we start to study what their function is, we can see that they work in combination with something that's completely different. So when we look at the wind and we look at the sun and we look at the rain and we look at the soil, we can say, okay, all these things are individual things that are completely different one from the other. But once we start to investigate how they operate and what they're there for, we can see that they all participate in a way that provides man sustenance, various forms of sustenance. And then we should study the signs of wisdom that are evident in the creation of an entity, in its content and its appearance. And there's a little note here. There are two versions of the Hebrew text of the Kavod HaLevavot, the duties of the heart. For the following lines, in the interest of completeness, we have presented both versions. So this is version 1 as it appears in the Kavod HaLevavot. And then we should study the proper functioning of an entity, the ultimate perfect purpose for which it was created, that is to support the role of mankind in serving Hashem. Reflecting on creation also involves recognizing the spiritual and physical aspects of the world. So we have to be involved in recognizing the spiritual and physical aspects of the world, as well as the relationships among entities which result in a pattern of causes and effects. Now this is version number 2. And then we should study the fulfilling purpose for which an entity was created, e.g. vegetation, reaching fulfillment by serving as food for an animal. Reflecting on creation also involves recognizing the glorious spiritual quality of this world, because there are spiritual forces in everything, even in animate objects. And we should also study how entities are related to other entities, resulting in a pattern of causes and effects. I'm sort of more partial to the second version. I don't know about you. We should put it down in the comments which version you liked better. We should also, we should also study the ultimate perfect function for which an entity was created. That is to support the role of mankind in serving Hashem. We also need to have insight into the pervasiveness of the spiritual quality of this world and its physical expression, such as to appreciate the special spiritual aspects of the heavenly bodies, fire and air. We also should study the world's human-speaking animals, dumb creatures, its stationary and mobile things, its lifeless objects and its growing things, its elements that rise, fire and air, and its elements that sink, water and earth. Now, the reference to dumb creatures isn't saying that, any type of animal that isn't mankind is dumb. It's just a way of differentiating species or animals that have sekel and animals that have intellect and animals that don't have intellect but are just imbued with instinct. We should realize when reflecting on creation that the Creator, may He be exalted, combines the elements in the right proportions, arranged them effectively and divided their functions along clear lines. This is extremely interesting because as you look at various things, you'll see that miraculously everything seems to know to stay in its lane, so to speak. And nothing kind of, edges in and encroaches upon something else and sort of, cause its path to causes something else to change direction, and, things don't become wild. Things, like an orange tree is always going to continue to reproduce another orange tree, for example. He did it in such a way that it points to Him and alludes to Him, just as a work alludes to its maker, the house alludes to its builder. Reflecting on nature involves paying attention to everything in the world from the largest, most comprehensive entities down to the finest details. And in many ways, we are learning the mindset of Avraham Avinu. Avraham was a standout individual on earth in that out of all the human beings that existed at the time, he was the one and only individual in the world that could see that there was something here that was in plain sight, yet was absent. So almost like seeing a palace, if you like, but there's no occupancy in the palace. And not only that, the palace is actually on fire. You know, the palace is actually it's in danger. And so, you know, not only does the fire have to be put out, but the owners of the palace, you know, we've got to seek them out and tell them, hey, you know, this place is on fire. Let's fix it together. For example, the sun is far away and yet it cooperates with the oceans and with the soil to produce food. The heat of the sun causes water to evaporate from the oceans and then rises to form clouds. The clouds pass over the continents and release the water in the form of rain. What makes the rain fall to the earth? It is a force of gravity, which is one of the Kokat HaTeva, the forces of nature. How do the clouds travel from the oceans to the continents? They are driven by the winds. And so the sun and the ocean and the winds and the force of gravity cooperate to produce rain. Finally, the soil cooperates to produce food. We can also look into the details and see how all detailed components work together. In the soil, there are thousands of different tiny creatures, including fungi and bacteria, all of which work together to help produce food. The soil receives all kinds of materials that are no longer needed, including dead leaves, waste, wasted food and bodily waste. These materials are recycled by the soil, which transforms them into useful materials, forming a fertilizer compost. Thus, the discarded waste contributes to new food. Everything works together, testifying to the grand plan of the designer of the world. Okay, so this is part 2, the interdependence of matter and spirit. The interdependence of matter and spirit, and we're up to page 6. You need to know that the entire world is made up of matter and spirit. Matter, which in Hebrew is gashmiut, is what we can see with our eyes and study in laboratories, but spirit, raknius, is a vital force that is inside of everything and enables them to complete their function. And I've mentioned it many times before, that the body functions without your cooperation in terms of the heart is actually beating, and that beats without your permission. And you know, you can go and do some strenuous exercise and cause the heartbeat to go up, or you can go to sleep and it will cause the heart rate to go down, but that heart will just keep doing its thing. And not only that, when you eat food, the food that you digest will have the nutrients removed from it, and what can't be gleaned as nutrients will go to waste, and that will go into the territory or that part of the city that it's meant to go into. And you don't control that. That does its thing. When you get sick, certain antibodies are brought to bear to fight off the sickness, and they have the ability to kind of get around the body that is more maneuverable than other things in the body. And so the human body in itself is a complex city with multiple things, dozens of things, more than dozens of things, you know, up in the hundreds of things that are actually doing their own thing. You know, they've all got jobs to do, and we don't have any control over that. And that is ruknius. That is this certain sort of spirit, this vital force that causes us to continue to just keep on. If we look inside the seed, we cannot see anything that will make us understand how this seed can produce an apple tree. What we don't see is the vital force, the life of the seed. If we compare a living animal with the same animal after it's dead, we see nothing that can explain how the animal was able to function when it was alive. It is that vital force, that rachnios, that we cannot see. Hashem made the world dependent on rachnios to let us know that nothing is as simple as it seems. People typically sense that there is some hidden presence that they don't understand. And when we look through the forest, all we see are the individual trees, but from a distance we sense that there is more to it, a mysterious presence that we cannot see. Similarly, when we travel in an ocean liner to the horizon, we see only more water, but we sense that we are missing something mysterious that makes the ocean what it is. There is a secret here, and that secret, which is the secret of the world, is the Devar Hashem, the word of Hashem, as it says in Psalm 33:6, by the word of Hashem the heavens were made, and by the breath of his mouth all their host. The idea is carried forward, for he spoke and it became, and he commanded and it stood firm. So he spoke and it became, and he commanded and then it stood firm. It moved from being emanating into existence to then actually performing a function that is firm. The word of Hashem is in all creation, and he gives it the pulse of life, which causes it to function. The mystery that we sense in nature is a true mystery. Hashem hides his presence in nature. As it says, in the shadow he lodges, and that's quoting again from Psalm 91:1. In the shadow the Almighty lodges. Hashem's presence is hidden from us in shadow. We sense it, but we cannot see it directly. There are two things to keep in mind when reflecting on creation. First is chokmah, that is wisdom, that we see with our eyes and the way things are arranged, the plan and the purpose revealed in the Nefilat HaBoriah, that is the wonders of creation. These are miracles of engineering and design, the smallest of which is impossible to imagine happening without the Creator's hand. But besides all the Nefilot HaBoriah, the world of creation, there's a mystery how they function and how they function. I don't know if that's a typo there. Something is concealed here, and that mystery is the word of Hashem, the life force in all the things in the world. Everything in the world is composed of two separate entities. There is a material entity that we can see, and there's a spirit in it that is invisible. The spirit is the wisdom and the kindness of Hashem that are inherent in everything. It's like saying everything in the world has a soul. Besides its body, which we can see, it has a soul that is its intended reason for being, which we have to study to discover. There is no object in the world that is not imbued with this intention of spirit. As it says, quoting Shacharit, the Shacharit prayer that is read on Shabbos, his greatness and his goodness fill the world. This means literally everything in this world, whether it's a snake or a bee, has a dual existence. Besides seeing what is obvious to our eyes, we have a mission in life to see the wisdom and kindness which are the purpose of everything. As the author observed earlier, we are like people who have been admitted to an eye hospital to heal their ability to see. We need to learn how to see that the entire world is nothing but the purposeful kindness of Hashem. And as we've mentioned before, we start out by taking for granted the things that we see around us that are commonplace. And that includes all the things that we require, like food, shelter, warmth, and all these things that we've been given from the very time we can remember being a small child. And so therefore we just naturally think that they're going to continue to occur. And so it never dawns on us, because these things have always been provided for us to a greater or lesser extent throughout our life, that all these things are profoundly beneficial to us, and they are a kindness that Hashem has bestowed on us. This helps us to understand the Gemara, according to Tractate Berakot 4b, that teaches that if a person says the Ashrei prayer 3 times a day, he is a Ben Olam Haba. He is a shorter place in the world to come. So the Ashrei prayer is a certain portion of the book of Psalms that is read. most Jews will read this at least 3 times a day. I myself have the custom of reading it at least once. And this is why the book of Psalms is on such high rotation in terms of the prayer books pertaining to any and every subject and time of year, is because the potency of the words that were assembled by David Amalek have life-giving force. And that's another one of the great mysteries. That Psalms is such a unique work among all the works of the Tanakh. This is because it contains the verse. So this is speaking about the Ashrei prayer, and so the majority of the Ashrei prayer comes from, again, Psalm 145, which is a very favoured psalm that we are quoting quite consistently in this series. And the verse says, and it's specifically from verse 16, and it says, "The eyes of all look to you with hope, and you give them their food in its proper time." It's not that verse sufficient. Is not that verse sufficient? Excuse me. The answer is that the first verse speaks of Hashem's kindness. The eyes of all look to you with hope, and you give them their food in its proper time. The second verse tells us that He opens His hand to do so. It is saying that all of Hashem's power in this world is dedicated only to that purpose. So when you look around at creation, you have to understand that all creation was created for you. All creation was created for you. It wasn't created for another higher species of being that was different to mankind. It was created for you. It was created for me. It was created for them. It was created for all of us. This can be illustrated by the wealthy businessman who is responsive to requests for donations to various charities. However, this businessman is not in the business merely to give tzedakah, give charity. He thinks tzedakah is a byproduct of his business activities, but Hashem is in business only for the purpose of doing righteousness and kindness. That is the significance of the words "you open your hand." The expression "your hand" means that all the power is only for the purpose of chesed, righteousness and kindness. Why is it that a person says this verse 3 times a day and understands it as Ben Olam Haba, somebody who is eligible for the world to come? It is because the purpose of our being in this world is to recognize that great truth. If we recognize that the world is filled with the bottomless wisdom and brilliance of design, all the purpose of kindness to mankind, we merit the Olam Haba. So I'll say that again. If we recognize that the world is filled with the bottomless wisdom and brilliance of design, all for the purpose of the kindness, or of kindness to mankind, we merit the Olam Haba. And it's if we miss that, we really mar our opportunities. Okay, we may inherit an Olam Haba to a certain extent, but we could have inherited a much higher level. And therefore, to become Ben Olam Haba, a person must open his eyes and see. He came to the eye hospital to be treated for blindness. If he was cured, he achieved his purpose. So don't get into the habit of reading the Ashrei 3 times a day just to hit a marker and get a tick in the box. The idea is that when you read through the Ashrei, that you are internalizing what you are reading. And this is beginning to have an effect on how you perceive the world. So, okay, if you want to take up the gamut of reading the Ashrei 3 times a day, be warned that it's not the fact that you're reading it 3 times a day that assures you of an Olam Haba, as in getting a tick in a box and say, hey, I read it 3 times a day. It's if this principle that is mentioned in this particular portion of the prayers is actually, making sense to you and going deep into your psyche. In that you're not just looking at everything like, okay, it's a tree, who cares? Now, there is something the world still doesn't understand. We won't hear much about this concept and this purpose of our lives. But the Kivot HaLevavot insist it is a fundamental purpose of our lives to recognize that Hashem made this world for kindness. It's one thing to believe that God created the world. It's another thing entirely to believe that He created it for kindness, for showing mankind kindness. In fact, that's something that I don't think I've ever heard before. Plenty of people will say that they believe that God created the world, but very few, if any, maybe you've heard of some people saying it. I can't remember if I have. People saying that he made the world for kindness. People would probably more likely say that life's hard. It's hard to live in the world. The Almighty created a world of hardship. I find life hard, some people might say. As he himself states, quoting from Genesis 1:31, the word is very good. And David Melech says in Psalm 136:1, his kindness endures forever. And he goes on to say in Psalm 136:5, give thanks to him who made the heavens with understanding. End of quote. Why did he do that? For his kindness endures forever. In that psalm, David gives a long list of what Hashem created, yet that list is only the barest outline. He states that all items on the list are for the purpose of, for his kindness endures forever. And if you're familiar with that particular chapter, you'll remember it continues at the end of every sentence, for his kindness endures forever. And it goes into the next topic, for his kindness endures forever. Some congregations have the custom to sing that or chant that or in unison say that prayer out loud in a communal reading of a Siddur. So we see that the word is for the purpose of recognizing that his kindness endures forever. The author of the Kavod HaLevavot tells us this concept is evident in every aspect of the world if we only train ourselves to look for it. Now, it's going to take work and it's going to take time. This isn't going to come to you after one video that you've just watched. I encourage you to go out and start to purchase the Duties of the Mind series by Rabbi Victor Miller, and not only read along with me in these videos, but also read them in your own time and study them and take notes and highlight passages and begin to challenge yourself to see if there's, and there are, though I guarantee you there are, if there's things that you can improve and you can fix and you can even completely remove, and there's things that you can just completely add that you aren't a feature of who you are. It's up to you. You can build the person that you want to be in terms of being somebody who follows after the heart of his maker. Really it's just the level of ignorance that you have to all these things is in proportion to, how limited the amount of learning that you've done up to now. But you can just set a schedule and you'll be surprised how little amount of time it takes, as long as you adhere to that schedule, that you'll manage to start to get through books and start to knock over various topics. And you'll, I'm not a reader. You will be, people watching this. I'm not much of a reader. I've heard that many, many times before, and that's no excuse. Don't just listen to lectures. Now, if you can't read, that's one thing. But if you're just not interested in reading, read as much as you can and focus on actually smiling as you read and having a happy expression on your face, and continue to do it. And I guarantee over time, you'll enjoy it. But it just takes time, and you've got to break through that. Provided you can read. If you can't read, that's a different story. But any of you out there that are saying, listen, I'm not a reader, that's no excuse. In fact, the greater is the reward of somebody that comes to this subject who isn't a reader, that embarks on a regime and a schedule of reading. And you just keep doing it. It's like when you have to eat veggies. When you're little, you don't want to eat your veggies. Your mum says, eat your veggies. And so you go, okay, they're good for me, I better eat them. And over time, not in all cases, sometimes into adulthood, you still don't like cauliflower or broccoli. That's it, broccoli. I don't eat broccoli. I could probably eat broccoli raw, but not cooked. And, there's plenty of other things I didn't like, but now as an adult, I eat. And I actually like it. Because over time, you just go, okay, this is good for me, I'll eat it. Okay, I'll eat it again. And then you you develop a taste for it, even though initially you might not have liked it. So if you don't like reading, set yourself a schedule, not an overwhelming one, something that's reasonable, but at least 2 pages of a day of a book, maybe 1 page a day if it's really hard, and stick to it. And read Psalms every day, and read it according to the monthly cycle that the Jews follow. Get into the habit of reading Tikkun HaKlali, the 10 Psalms of the General Repair, and get into the habit of reading every day, and set yourself a schedule and a time every morning before you leave for work to do it. And it can be 10 minutes, 20 minutes, an hour, 2 hours if you've got the time. But stick to that schedule. Do not break that schedule. If it's 20 minutes every morning before you go out the door or have breakfast, stick to that 20 minutes like clockwork. Don't bounce it out, and don't allow it to be the first thing that you nudge away when something comes up. You know, you don't want to do something. This is the first thing I'm going to drop when all of a sudden the road gets rough. No, even though the road gets rough, I'll stick to this 20 minutes that I've implanted in the morning to set aside to learn, even when I'm having a bad time. In fact, it's okay for you to probably let other things go, maybe have shorter showers, maybe, don't sort of dilly-dally as long as you've been doing in the kitchen for making breakfast. Fine, drop those things or, reduce those things, but your 20 minutes that you've set for yourself, or your half an hour or your 40 minutes, keep it and just keep doing it every day. Keep doing it every day. Keep doing it every day. Some of you may already be doing something similar to this, and you may be watching this video and you need a little bit of a kick along because you're struggling to maintain it. Keep doing it. It's gonna pay dividends for you in the long term. I guarantee it. The external and internal aspect of creation, matter and spirit, are so intrinsically mixed and combined that each of them sustains the other, like a body and a soul of a living person. For the body cannot exist without the soul, and the soul cannot exist without the body. Similarly, the external events that we see in nature fulfill the internal hidden purposes of the eternal purpose, and the eternal purpose explains what we see on the outside. So in many ways, what is exhibited on the outside that we can see with our eyes is a hint to the true purpose of what's going on inside or beyond what we can see with our physical eyes. If we understand the internal purpose, we understand the external phenomenon. For instance, why should a bee sting people? Is this a harmful creature? Is this a harmful creation? The answer is apparent if we know that the bee is motivated by the need to make honey, which it stores for us as food. In making honey, the bee flies from flower to flower, transferring pollen from one to another so that the flowers will germinate. As hundreds of thousands of species of plants are dependent on this process for their continued existence, is the ultimate purpose of the bee's existence. But the entire process depends on the bee's drive to make honey, and the bee needs to protect its honey from creatures that would take it for themselves. Without a beehive filled with honeycombs, the bee would not survive the winter, nor could it propagate. Therefore, the bee needs to sting to be able to ward off intruders. Thus, we see that the bee sting is actually a benefit. So when a bee stings you, it dies, and so it takes one for the team. So there's a whole bunch of bees doing their thing, and one bee stings and kills whatever was about to assail it, and the other bees go, "Good on you, Jono, for doing that for us. You will be long remembered." But the idea is that no, they're not like a vicious creature, a vicious insect. They are just focused on their job, on their goal, and this is something that aligns with ensuring that they're going to continue to do what it is they've been created for. Therefore, the bee needs to sting to be able to ward off intruders. Thus, we see that the bee's sting is actually a benefit. It is needed for the bee to survive and continue to fulfill its mission of causing plants to generate. And so we see that by knowing the internal purpose, we can better understand the external phenomenon. The same is true with certain snakes. Snakes seem to be harmful, especially those that are poisonous. And trust me, I live in Australia where we have Unfortunately, the majority of the most poisonous snakes in the world. However, we need to realize that without snakes, rodents in the fields will multiply without restraint, thereby endangering agriculture. We need those snakes to keep the smaller animals in check, and therefore the fact that the snake is poisonous and kills by biting is a tremendous benefit for mankind. Thus, the external phenomenon is explained by the internal purpose, and the internal phenomenon directs our thinking to the internal aspect. And the external phenomenon directs our thinking to the internal aspect. So by looking at by knowing what the internal purpose is, we get an understanding of why the external is like it is. And by looking at the external, we can also get an understanding by knowing perhaps what what we can't see, what the purpose is there. So it's a sort of a symbiont of purpose that is going on. So two things that are working in symbionism. I don't know if that's a word. In symbiosis, I don't know. Put in the comments what the correct word is for that particular purpose, whatever it is. The living person is not only a mass of protoplasm, but a being that demonstrates purpose. We can get some idea of this purpose from the design of the physical body, but especially from a person's face. The face is a window into the noble internal quality of the human being. Emotions, aspirations, and ideals are all hinted at in the expressions of the face. And really, it's just the face, with the exceptions of the ends of the arms, the limbs of the arms, which are hands, are really what we see mostly of other human beings. And so from sort of the neck up, there is a lot of things, there's a lot of signals going on that, that speak in volumes with what is found just in a small part of what makes up the overall human body, which is the head. It's almost like a flag for everything else. The eyes are key. The eyes they say are the windows to the soul. Thus the face points to the internal purpose, which is the source of a person's nobility, even if he fails to fulfill that purpose properly. Why does a person have these signs of nobility in his outward appearance? It is in order to let us know that man is great. Man is great. We should never belittle a person. We should never think a person is a nobody. In fact, every person has the potential to become great. This is true because Hashem gave him a soul that we cannot see. That soul, the intellect, and the aspirations that a person can have for noble ideals, is suggested by the nobility of the face. And you see some people, some poor people, some homeless people, and they're really old, and they've got these big long beards, and their faces look like they're out of time. They're from some other era, some other age. But you see their eyes and you see the chiseled features of their face, and they're on the street, but they look like people that are just so full of wisdom, like they're streetwise. There's a thing called being streetwise, and you can definitely see that these people can survive. Whereas if we were all of a sudden thrust on the street, in the next couple of days, we'd be lucky to survive one night. Whereas this person has learnt to survive most of his life living on the street, so he's has a street knowledge. He's streetwise. That's the expression that we used to use. If you look at a baby, it looks into your eyes. But if you look at a little dog, it won't respond by looking into your eyes. Even the dog may be your best friend, who is always jumping and licking you, and still won't look into your eyes. That's because mankind has a different purpose. Men were created to be sympathetic towards each other, and so they look into each other's eyes. Therefore, when we look at a person, the outward aspect of his being hints to the wonderful purpose that was intended by the creation of his outward features. And so, that's why when you look at a newborn baby even, or not a newborn because they can't really see immediately, but when they're starting to see, there's some exceptions to that rule. They will look at you deeply in your eye because they're going, well, what is that? They're like taking it all in. They're going, who is this? And you can see them really looking at you sometimes. I've had it happen a couple of times in my life with my kids, and I've seen videos and I've seen other kids do it. And the baby's just looking up at them, and you can see the baby's mind is racing at 100 miles an hour. and they're looking really deeply and trying to get their head around it. And a dog, dog's just like, hey, how you going? I think we'll leave it there. That takes us to page 111. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you got something out of that. Secret word is honeycomb. And I just read that off the page. Honeycomb. It's on page 110. Let me know that you got this far. Put it in a sentence. Don't just write the word honeycomb and give the game away. And I'll know and Hashem know and you will know that you have done some hard yards with me today and stuck with me through this entire video, learning how to reflect on creation. Until next time, bye for now.